So let's take a look and see how this whole comparative advantage specialization trading thing works. I think back in Unit 1, we had the example of me, Mr. Bradley, and Mr. Miller washing cars and motorcycles to see who has the comparative advantage in what. But let's take a look at it from a country level. So we're going to have Bradley Land and Millertopia. Instead of washing cars and motorcycles, they're going to be producing cars and motorcycles. So let's say Bradley Land, if they put all their focus on making cars, Bradley Land could produce 12,000 cars in a day. But instead, if they put all their focus on motorcycles, they could produce 6,000 motorcycles in that same day. Or anywhere in between, right? Anywhere along that production possibilities curve. Millertopia, it's 4,000 cars or 16,000 motorcycles, or anywhere in between. So who has the comparative advantage in the production of cars? Well, again, what we want to do is we need to find what is their opportunity cost for just one car. For every one car that either country wants to make, how many motorcycles would they have to stop making? Well, for Bradley Land, again, we would just set that 12,000 cars equal to 6,000 motorcycles, divide both sides by 12,000, and we would find that for Bradley Land, the opportunity cost for one car is half a motorcycle. We would do the same thing for Millertopia, right? 4,000 cars is equivalent to 16,000 motorcycles. Divide both sides by 4,000. We would get one car is equivalent to 4 motorcycles. So who can produce one car and give up fewer motorcycles in the process? Well, obviously, it's Bradley Land because 1/2 is less than 4. And so Bradley Land has the comparative advantage. Well, what about when it comes to motorcycles? Well, again, we would do the same thing. We would set the 12,000 cars equivalent to 6,000 motorcycles for Bradley Land. We'd divide both sides this time by 6,000. We'd get one motorcycle is equivalent to 2 cars. And so what that means is that for every one motorcycle that Bradley Land wants to produce, Bradley Land would have to stop making 2 cars. And right, it's just the reciprocal of what we had above. Remember, we had said that before. Now for Millertopia, we do the math there and we find that one motorcycle is equivalent to 1/4 of a car. So who can produce one motorcycle and give up fewer cars in the process? Well, we see that it would be Millertopia. Millertopia has the comparative advantage. And why do we need to worry about this? Well, we say that whoever has a comparative advantage, they're going to specialize in that. And so countries are going to specialize or put all their focus and attention on what they have the comparative advantage in. Back to that Carmel High School example, I have a comparative advantage when it comes to teaching economics. I understand how to be more efficient with that than if I was to try to teach you like science or something, and there's people who are a lot better at that. And so I have the comparative advantage in economics, so I'm going to specialize in that. And then there's other people who they have comparative advantages in art or theater or foreign language, so they'll specialize in that. So taking a look at this country example, we see Millertopia is going to specialize in producing motorcycles. Millertopia is going to put all their resources toward that, make 16,000 in a day. Bradley Land is going to specialize in making cars and produce 12,000 of those per day. And then they're going to trade. But here's the big question. At what rate will that trade be beneficial both for Bradley Land and for Millertopia? So where exactly would they end up trading at? Well, what we find out is that trade will occur at a rate that falls between their opportunity cost ratios. Well, what exactly does that mean? What do we mean by opportunity cost ratios? Well, let's take a look at the opportunity cost ratios when it comes to the opportunity cost of a single car, right? So we said Bradley Land. For Bradley Land to produce one car would have to stop making half a motorcycle. Millertopia, one car would be 4 motorcycles. Well, what we would see is that they would trade at a rate that is somewhere between these two. And what we mean is they would trade every one car for somewhere between 1/2 to 4 motorcycles. So maybe one car for every 1 motorcycle, one car for every 2 motorcycles, one car for every 3.5 motorcycles. Any of those would fall in that range and would be beneficial to both of them. Now let's take a look at why. So Bradley Land, who specializes in cars. If Bradley Land would want motorcycles on their own, they would have to give up half a motorcycle, right? Now here's what we see. By trading with Millertopia, Bradley Land can gain more than half a motorcycle for every car that it trades away. You know, if they were to just on their own, if they on their own were to stop making cars to try to get motorcycles, they would only get 1/2 of a motorcycle for every car that they gave up. But hey, for every car that they give up trading with Millertopia, if they get more than half that motorcycle, they're benefiting from it, right? Like say the trade ratio was 1-to-1. If Bradley Land was able to trade one car away and get one motorcycle for that, hey, that's better than the 1/2 that they would get on their own by, stopping making one car and making motorcycles instead. So Bradley Land would benefit from anything more than getting 1/2 of a motorcycle. Now, Millertopia, remember, is producing motorcycles. But if you notice, at a rate of one car for every 1/2 to 4 motorcycles, what we see is Millertopia will gain a car for giving up fewer than 4 motorcycles. Like at that 1-to-1 ratio, Millertopia could just give up 1 motorcycle and get a whole car. On their own, they would have to give up 4 motorcycles to get that car. They would have to stop making 4 of them in order to make 1 car on their own. But by trading, they're able to get away with giving up fewer motorcycles, and Millertopia can benefit as well. So let's take a look at what this looks like on graphs. Let's suppose that Millertopia and Bradley Land negotiate and they come to the agreement that they're going to trade 1 car for every 2 motorcycles. So let's go ahead and draw Bradley Land's or their production possibilities curve, right? So we said 12,000 cars or 6,000 motorcycles, and Millertopia's production possibilities curve, right? 4,000 cars, 16,000 motorcycles. Now we said that they are going to specialize. Bradley Land is going to produce right there. Bradley Land is going to make 12,000 cars at that yellow point, and Millertopia is going to produce at that yellow point, making 16,000 motorcycles. So if you notice, both of them are producing on their production possibilities curve because they can't produce beyond it. Anything outside of their production possibilities curve, we said it's impossible. So they're trading at a rate of 1 car for every 2 motorcycles. Well, let's suppose that they trade at that rate, but they, traded obviously more than just 1 car for 2 motorcycles. Let's say they did that 4,000 times over. So let's say that Bradley Land sends 4,000 cars to Millertopia in exchange for 8,000 motorcycles, right? That's still that ratio of 1 to 2. So here's how we see that show up on our production possibilities curve. We see that Bradley Land is going to export 4,000 cars. So if you notice, that red arrow takes us from 12,000 down to 8,000 because we're sending 4,000 of them to Millertopia. Now Millertopia is importing those 4,000 cars. So if you notice, their cars, the number of cars in that country goes from 0 up to 4,000. Now again, Bradley Land, I'm not just sending those cars to him for free. I better get some motorcycles in return. So Millertopia then exports 8,000 motorcycles. And so we see, if you notice, we move left along our x-axis, and Millertopia gives up 8,000 motorcycles. But guess what? Bradley Land is importing those 8,000 motorcycles. And if you notice, after that exporting and importing, we have new points. And these 2 points are now points of cars and motorcycles that country now possesses. Bradley Land is now at a point of 8,000 motorcycles and 8,000 cars. That is a point that is well beyond the production possibilities curve, right? It's now a point that was before impossible, but through trading, it's now possible. Millertopia too, look at that. Millertopia is at a point of 8,000 motorcycles and 4,000 cars. That's a point that Millertopia couldn't have achieved on their own. So if we notice, through trade, everyone is now better off because they specialized and then they traded and were able to achieve a combination of goods that they could not achieve on their own.